Thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. It's a great conference. Today I'm going to present Chapter 2 of the April edition of the World Economic Outlook at the IMF. For those not familiar with the publication, the report is released in April and October. It includes a chapter on the conjuncture, on our view on the global economy, but then it also includes 2 or 3 chapters on analytical topics, on a deep dive on some specific issues. And this time, we thought that it was a good opportunity to take stock of the implications of population aging for the macroeconomy at the global level, or the implications of the rise in the silver economy, as we called it. So you've seen a lot already. There will be some repetition. Bear with me for a second. Why we tackle this? You know, all you here know the facts very well. 2 strong developments over recent decades and that are projected to persist for a while: the declining infertility rates and the increase in life expectancy have been determined and will determine a dramatic transformation of the global demography during this century. And it has implications on different fronts. It has implications on the growth rate of population. It has implications on the age composition of economies and beyond. And it's a global phenomenon, but it's occurring at a different pace. So if we look at the chart on the left, we see that basically on the declining, as a result of declining fertility, the growth rate of global population, which was around 1% per year pre-COVID, is projected to slow down gradually for the global, for the world as a whole, and to reach 0 or even turn negative towards the end of the century. At the same time, on the red line in the same left-hand side chart, the average age of the world population is projected to increase steadily, rising by about 11 years since 2020 to the end of the century. So that's population growth. But these shifts also have, as we heard today several times, important changes in the age composition of our economies, and that has profound implications. So the chart in the middle shows the increase over decades of the share of the population age 65 and above on total population. That has increased dramatically in some countries, and the projection is for a sustained increase going forward. So we'll kind of, on the next 50 years, it will increase significantly in countries like China and some emerging markets in Asia, but broadly throughout the world. Now, the pace of this demographic shift is uneven. You heard that also earlier. One way to look at this is to look at the point in time where countries will be crossing their demographic turning point. That is defined when the share of working age population in total population begins to shrink, and that's what we are showing in the chart on the right. And as you can see, advanced countries like Germany, France, Italy, Japan crossed that turning point several years ago in the 80s and 90s. But by 2035, most, or if not all, large emerging markets, we have also reached that point. And even if we project forward, we look by 2070, the large low-income countries in terms of population, which today have very young populations, will see declining shares of the working age population. So that, of course, has always traditionally been perceived as a source of concern. Declining share of the working age population, and also a tilt toward an older workforce that is associated with lower participation rates and lower employment rates, means a drag on labor supply and a drag on economic growth. One aspect that has received a bit less attention, but again was also discussed today, is that individuals are not only living for longer, but generally, on average, aging in better health shape. The chart on the left shows that at the global level, and Matthias showed some statistics before, at the global level, life expectancy has increased by about close to 5 years, but a big fraction of, over the last 2 decades, but a big fraction of those have been on years free of chronic illnesses. Interesting, those developments, if we look at the cross-country distribution, there has been some sort of cross-country convergence or catch-up. So countries that had lower scores on health-adjusted life expectancy in the early 2000s have experienced a faster increase in health-adjusted life expectancy. So how this squares with the gloomy view on demographics, we are used to think about the old age dependency ratio as determined by a given year, an age, 65. So under current projections, taking this definition on the chart on the right, we see that the world age dependency ratio is projected to increase, but at a very fast rate going forward. Now, if we think that age can be malleable, as we heard earlier today, and we think about what would be if we define the old age as the point in time where life expectancy is around 15 years, then the picture is less starking, less dramatic. The question is whether those additional years getting that point is not only in good health, but also engage on the labor force, active, participating, and with productivity. So in this chapter, we had 3 blocks of questions that we wanted to tackle. First, on the healthy aging hypothesis and building on a lot of work that has been done, for example, by Andrew in the past and others on individual countries. We wanted to see whether if there is evidence of healthy aging along increased longevity on a broad set of countries, which is a common phenomenon. How does it look like? How strong it is, etc. And let me give you a preview of the results next to the questions. So we find that, yes, there is evidence, and in particular, we find that the cohort effect is particularly strong for cognitive capabilities, which is particularly relevant as older age workers tend to be in occupations where cognitive abilities are predominant. The second related question was whether the improvements in health we saw over cohorts are associated with better outcomes on the labor market for older individuals. And we found that, yes, they have significant and strong effects both on labor supply and on labor earnings and on labor productivity. The second bucket of questions we had is we wanted to combine these 2 forces, the age in the age distribution of the economy and the reduction in the growth rate of the population with this recent evidence on healthy aging and see what it implied for the global economy, the global implications for GDP growth, interest rate, public finances, and so on and so forth. And we find that despite a decent contribution that we can expect going forward from healthy aging under current policies, the world economy would still be projected to slow down significantly substantially over the next few decades. For the model simulation I'm going to show you in a minute, our estimation is about a 1.1 percentage point lower growth rate over the next 25 years than what we saw a little bit before COVID. We also find, consistent with the work of Adrian and Andrea early today, the interest rate, global interest rate is projected to go down, but R minus G, which will be important for fiscal dynamics, is projected in this context to go up, and the model also leads to divergence and net foreign asset positions, largely because of demographic forces, but also from other forces that we embed in the simulations. So healthy aging can offset some of this effect. Our estimations suggest that under assumptions I'm going to discuss in a minute, more or less about 1/4 to 1/3 of the effect of demographics over the next 25 years can be compensated, offset, reduced by ongoing healthy aging phenomena. The last part, we ask how policies can help countries navigate these challenges. We look at a comprehensive but feasible set of policy efforts squared on labor supply, and we find that they could offset a significant fraction of the drag from demographics over the next decades, 3/4 if we look at the next 25 years, about 1/3 if we look at the whole century. So on the empirics, what we do is we use data from microsurveys that focus on old age individuals. The data covers around 1 million people, age 50 years and above, from 29 advanced countries and 12 emerging markets, covering the period from 2000 to 2022. The data set includes measures on health indicators, both measured and self-reported indicators that cover physical, cognitive, and mental health dimensions. You see on the bottom 2 charts that cover the bucket on measured and self-reported health indicators. The database includes measures, for example, on grip strength and lung function, on capturing physical strength, and indicators on memory, orientation, verbal fluency, and math abilities to cover cognitive abilities of older individuals, which we group into a principal component. The database also includes information on whether individuals have been diagnosed with chronic diseases, and in data on health behavior of individuals, where they smoke, or the extent of physical activity, overweight, etc. It includes labor market indicators, both on supply and earnings, and a broad set of socioeconomic characteristics. So to assess whether individuals on later born cohorts have better health than those from earlier born cohorts at the same age, we run a regression of each individual health indicator on the year of the survey, controlling for age and socioeconomic characteristics. Would be the same of running the regression on the birth cohort of the individuals. And what we find is that the cohort effect is significant across the measures we look. So in the chart on the left, we look the trend, so the cohort effect for measured health indicators and for self-reported indicators. And in particular, the cohort effect on cognitive abilities is particularly strong. So to understand what this means, how to translate these trends to what we call an age-equivalent healthy aging gains, similar to what Andrew and others have done in the literature, we look at an individual 70 years old in 2022, get the average health score for that individual, controlling for all the covariates, and then we look at which cohort had the same health indicator, if we go back to 2000, and this is what is shown on the chart on the right. And we see that for physical indicators, for example, grip strength, the answer would be that his ability would be comparable to someone age 67 in the year 2000. But for a cognitive principal component indicator, and that would be comparable to an individual age 53 in the year 2000. So it's a quite strong effect. The results are robust for using, instead of OLS, moon-lag specifications. Something that was mentioned earlier, the reports, the results I just shown are average effects, but of course there's a lot of disparities. There's a lot of heterogeneity in health indicators across people. Just to get a glance of these, there are sizable disparities both across countries. Advanced countries have better health scores, here focusing on cognitive metrics, than emerging markets, and within countries there are notable disparities, notably in terms of education levels and wealth of the household. And if we look at the trend, at the cohort effect by different subgroups, we do find some evidence of narrowing gaps across countries, but not that much within countries across socioeconomic characteristics. So there are disparities, and those disparities seem to have persisted in the last 2.5 decades or so. So what does health has been improving over cohorts? Do we find evidence that this has been reflected on labor market outcomes based on the same data? Just looking at correlations, we do find that that better health is associated indeed with higher labor earnings, total earnings, and also hourly earnings. And it's also associated with increased labor supply, both on the extensive margin, on the decision to participate or not in the labor market, but also the likelihood of having a job, the likelihood of not being unemployed, and so on, and also in the intensive margin in terms of the hours worked. There could be a lot of reverse causality and homogeneity in looking just at Euler's regression, so we instrumented the health indicators with the incidence of chronic diseases after controlling for health behaviors that we have in the database. So the chart on the left is showing the effects of the two-stage least squares regression, so the instrumented variables approach, and the coefficients have been rescaled to show the effect over the cohort effects that we observe over 1 decade. So to get a sense of magnitudes, we found that, for example, for labor force participation, the increase on health the cohort effect that we observe over 1 decade is associated with around a 20% improvement in the likelihood of supplying labor, and its increase is associated with about a 30% higher labor earnings and labor productivity, and also with a significant increase in the number of hours worked per week, so in the intensive margin of about 6 hours. The gains are, the effects of healthy aging on labor market outcomes are different across age groups. They are particularly strong on the 50 to 59 age group, and this is particularly relevant because this is a group where labor force participation in particular drops significantly in the data. So let me tell you briefly what we did to put this all together and get baseline projections under both demographic and healthy aging trends. The model we used to do this is the model that Adrian presented this morning, who helped us a big time to put this chapter together, was a consultant for the WIO. So I'm not going to go in any detail on what the model has. I'm going to just talk about 2 or 3 extensions that we did for the questions we had in mind. First, we extended the country coverage because we wanted to have a broader representation of, especially on the population side. We include a block, a 26 block, comprising 44 low-income countries, those that are going to have their demographic turning points towards the end of the century. Then, you may remember from Adrian's presentation, the age productivity profiles that the model uses are static, so it has a profile that comes from the data. We allowed those profiles to shift over time, over cohorts, to capture potential healthy aging effects. That means that the productivity or the effective labor supply of individuals 50 plus of later cohorts will be larger than of earlier cohorts. We also allowed for time-varying TFP profiles to take into account that not only demographics will be shaping output on the next few decades, but also there will be a significant waning of catch-up convergence from large emerging markets. Baseline, the demographic trends are from the UN, which were presented earlier. And the model does consider that effective retirement age is still going to keep increasing over the next decades at a pace of 1 month per year. And we take public debt as we have in our projections up to 2030, and then we assume it remains stable. So two channels that are behind these simulations, demographic trends, forces are expected to have a significant drag on growth. We saw a lot of that earlier today, but it's expected to be very heterogeneous. And in countries like India, that we have a steep acceleration of aging towards the end of the second part of the century, the drag can be as large as 2.8 percentage point lower growth. And in countries like Hungary and Finland, 0.4. But even for the high fertility scenario, every country is experiencing lower GDP growth, aggregate GDP growth, not per capita. On healthy aging, we took the trends we saw in the data, but although it's very hard to capture non-linearities in the 2 decades of data we're using, we assume that these gains are going to dissipate going forward. And so we factor in additional healthy aging gains over the next 3 decades that are about 1/4 of the healthy aging gains that we observed from 2000 to 2022. With those, under that assumption, we have a positive contribution of healthy aging that is around 0.4 percentage point per year for the world economy defined in our model, with gains that go between 0.3 to 0.6. Still, putting this together with changing the age composition of the economy, and in our model simulations also with catching up from large emerging markets, our simulations suggest sizable decline in average global GDP growth in the order of 1% over the next 25 years, 2% if we take the century as a whole. That's the second block in the left chart. That's aggregate GDP. If we look at GDP per capita, we still find a significant slowdown in terms of GDP per capita, comparing the next 75 years vis-a-vis the pre-COVID years. Rates projected to go down, as we saw earlier in the model by Adrian. But even if real rates are expected to go down, R minus G would go up because of the severe reduction in growth rates. And if we look at public finance, the projections suggest that if we if we assume that debt is going to remain stable from 2030 onwards, that will require, for many countries, a significantly higher projected primary balance to GDP ratio that it was the case pre-COVID. On NFA, let me skip. You saw a lot of that earlier today. So what are the 3 policy areas that we consider? We focus on 3 areas on labor supply. On one element that we want to focus is wanted to explore is boosting the human capital of older individuals. Andrew alluded to this earlier today. There's a strong decline in the labor force participation of workers way before the retirement age. At the global level, it is something like 18 percentage points. It is even larger in countries like Greece and Italy, much lower in countries like Japan and Sweden. And so there is a lot of room to work on increasing the participation of that age bucket before even getting to what happens with a retirement age. The second area we wanted to focus is on the possibility of extending working life in line with increases in life expectancy. And the third area is on something that is not directly related to aging, but is still a pending area for policy work, that is narrowing further gender gaps in labor force participation. So we introduced three policy experiments in the model. In the first one, we assume that the cross-country disparity in cognitive health indicators that we saw in the data could be narrowed over the long run by 1/4. So the gains are heterogeneous across countries. Countries that are at the frontier, in this case is Sweden, would see no gain at all, but countries that are far from the frontier can get gains from increases in healthy aging and the associated effect that has on labor earnings. So shifting the age profile, the income profile of income at older ages. The second policy scenario we consider is assuming that in countries in which the gap between retirement age and life expectancy is above 20 years old, the pace of increase in effective age is slightly faster, up to the point in which it rebalances. So that means that in some countries, there would be no difference from the baseline, but in countries in which life expectancy is projected to increase dramatically, the effective retirement age would increase at a faster rate. And you know, it's important to keep in mind on this is based on effective retirement age, not necessarily on statutory retirement age. There are a lot of elements on incentives and designs of pension schemes and other features that could lead to higher effective retirement age. The Ministry of Economy and Finance today mentioned changes in Greece regarding limitations for people to work after being retired from their main occupation. Partial retirement schemes can also help in this line. So it's way beyond a mandatory retirement age. And in the third layer, we assume that country-specific gender gaps in labor force participation would be reduced by 3/4 by 2040. The assumed dividends of policies are within the range of what was observed in the last 2 to 3 decades. In that sense, they are feasible. And a combined scenario, including all these layers, could offset 3/4 of the drag from demographics that we saw on the last, that we would expect to see on the next 25 years. We also use the model to get a sense, to get a sense of the fiscal space that this would generate. So we are assuming that model economies keep the debt to GDP ratio stable from 2000 onwards. But so we can extract from the model what is the additional spending on general spending, or additional transfers or reductions in labor taxes that would be needed in order to keep that stable. Another way to think about this is what is the potential reduction, improvement you can get in the primary balance from these policies that would allow to reduce debt levels. There are two effects. One is direct on the primary balance. The other one is through interaction of R minus G. And in this sense, all these pro-growth policies would have an effect that would lead to a higher interest rate than in the baseline. So most economies do not benefit from this channel. But still, putting all together, the simulations indicate a relatively sizable fiscal space gain, which expressed on average, because they vary over time depending on when these policies pay off, would be in the order of 1% of GDP for the world economy, but in the order of 4 percentage points for countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain that have much more to gain. So to conclude, we look at the evidence on functional capacity of older individuals. We find that they did increase over time. There's positive, substantial cohort effects, that they are associated with better outcomes on labor market indicators of older workers. We put this on a general equilibrium model, and we find that although healthy aging, potential ongoing trends on healthy aging can offset part of the slowdown of the global economy, it won't be enough to completely overturn the tide. But of course, there's significant cross-country variation. We look at 3 different labor supply policies that could, although feasible, they could provide an important offsetting effect. We also looked at effects of improving the capital integration and the effects it can have on low-income countries that still have young populations, and the benefits that getting better access to global markets would imply, and how much it could offset the effect of losing labor to advanced countries, which we included in a box.
Perfect, thank you. And since we have Bertrand in the panel afterwards, there's no Q&A for you right now. Thank you very much.